Welcome to Dauntless Nation Podcast. We are your hosts, Michael and Dana Bryant.
We are committed to fearlessly strengthen the family unit through our podcast discussions, interviews,
and in-person trainings for teens and families. Our mission is to provide you with the tools to connect deeply in your relationships, face your fears,
conquer the challenges that get in the way, and create any life you want. Welcome to Dauntless Nation, where we are fearlessly strengthening the family unit. And this episode is about becoming dauntless. And in fact,
really quick. So tell me what it means to become dauntless. Like let our listeners and viewers know what, like, when you say becoming dauntless, like I know what that means, but how can you describe that to everybody listening?
First, we have to talk about two things. First, the definition of dauntless, because some may not know what it is. Dauntless means to be determined, and you have a feeling of fear, but you face those fears. And the best part of that definition for me is incapable of being subdued, which we can address. However, I would like to talk about who we are and what we're doing here. Right? So Dauntless Nation is really, now it's evolved into something beyond our elite experiential trainings for teens, because we have those in-persons and online courses and things like that. However, we are really talking about the whole family unit, tools and strategies for strengthening the family unit.
Well, so you know what I tell a lot of the teens that we work with is I tell them, hey, our advertising was that we work with teenagers, but if I advertise that we work with parents, I might not get any calls.
Yes.
So now that we got you, I tell the kids, hey, let's go have a good time and learn life. Now I can work with your parents also. Yeah. And they're like, yes, sign me up.
Yeah. And eventually the parents who we will often refer to as the guardians of Dauntless Nation, because the guardians with Dauntless Nation have become a sacred term. So many reasons we do it. We don't need to get into it, but the truth is that guardians of Dauntless Nation are the protectors of the next generation. And so that's
really quick. So describe what does it mean to be an elite member of Dauntless Nation? Because when I'm working with the kids, or even the guardians, is like, you are now the protectors of society and the protectors of the gifts and the tools necessary to be profitable for this life.
Yeah. So to be in Dauntless Nation, to be a part of our tribe, simply means that you are really facing your fears. We have in-person trainings, live events, things like that. But the reality is that they are after their best self, right? And we simply provide those tools and strategies. But I want to go back to your first question, becoming dauntless, because the name of it is really important to me personally, because I think that fear has gripped our nation in many ways. We're a little bit on the other side of it, but it was a major thing, and we see what it does to people.
Are we on the other side of it?
Well, or just the beginning. We can talk about that more. But the reason becoming is so important is because becoming is a process, and that's number one in the 5 laws of Dauntless Nation. And often I see when people are paralyzed with fear, because let's just talk about the definition of fear for a minute. Fear is a bully, as you say it, but most of all, like, becoming is a process. We don't sometimes we just jump out of the airplane, right? And you instantaneously face the fear. But when you're really gripped, either as a nation or a people or a person, we have to have strategies to ungrip ourselves.
Well, and having a vision, what I talk to our students about is like having a vision that you can emotionally attach yourself to that is bigger, larger, than the discomfort or the fear that you must walk through to actually attain that. And, we paint these pictures with everybody that we work with, like, there is a gift. God himself has placed a gift for you on the other side of your fear. So if you're going to allow fear to be a bully, and let's face it, that's what it is. It's a liar, a bully. If you're going to allow yourself to be bullied by that and not receive that gift, like, what is your life going to look like? Yeah. Now, what if you get that gift? What if you were to create a strategy and a vision that was bigger than the fear, and you weren't alone. And not only that, you knew that you weren't alone, and you got to walk through those fears with a unit.
Yes.
Now, this gift, when I use the word gift, and the word gift to me is actually a sacred term, because what you're going to attain, that gift you get to walk through eternity with it, but it is going to bless every single person that you ever come in contact with and yourself.
Well, the gift is not for ourselves alone, right? And that's the bigger part, right? Something bigger than ourselves. And I like to call it like the anchor, that if we don't know where we want to go, then how do we know how to get there? That's what we always say, right? So if we know where we want to go, we know how to get there, and the dream and the vision is bigger than the fear, then we can get unstuck and move forward. And I personally think that what's happening in our nation is, in us working so closely with families and teens, is the lack of motivation, the lack of vision, the lack of imagination that is occurring in the minds of the young is really what's gripping us, because they're not having these dreams that we may have had as a kid. Pete, don't misunderstand me. They have dreams, but something's occurred that's causing this lack of emotion. Will you speak to that, Michael?
Well, let's talk about that. And so this is one of my passions, is that, I'm not going to blame COVID for everything, but let's take a look at us as a nation, our responsibilities and our reactions to that. And these youngsters in the developmental process became isolated. And so they got on social media, video games. They started talking to me. So we are social creatures, everyone. And I don't care if you say you don't like people or not. You are created to be a social creature.
Yes.
Now, you get on social media, and it fools your brain into thinking that you're being social, and you're actually settling for a counterfeit, because there is, in the quantum field, there's an energy that happens inside of 6 feet, by the way. When we are in community, there's an energy exchange, and we get a shared effort in walking through this life. Now, Isaac Newton, he'd posted his 3 laws of motion. Now, a lot of people have heard, an object in motion stays in motion, or object at rest stays at rest.
Yeah.
So our response to COVID was the object, the force that stopped the human soul. Not all of them, but the majority of them. So when you think about that, now what we have is we have a bunch of human souls, our adolescents, the people who are going to be, ruling this nation and this world. Yeah. We have a bunch of souls that are at rest. Now, it's going to take a force greater than that soul, and oftentimes a force greater than the household itself, to kickstart that soul back into motion.
Yeah.
And Dauntless Nation is that force.
Yeah. And we've seen it play out, right? Because they start to wake up. They start to become alive. The neurons are firing. The body is moving, and the motion is happening. And really, we just ride that wave of momentum, right? But that at rest, when you started to talk about that is so significant, because the parents are calling, and even the parents themselves stuck. I mean, we've all been there, right? I think it was done on purpose, but nonetheless, here we are. And so how do you do those things? And it takes strategy.
Well, and so regardless of what happened, how it happened, the minds, we could get into that forever. The fact is that when we understand what our current reality is, and then where we want to go, and some of my favorite parts is when I get to work with these teens and the guardians, and we see the momentum, we start to see them dream of big dreams, their body posture starts to change. And it is infusing hope into the human soul. And I don't think I've done anything personally greater in my life than to actually walk next to another human soul and be part of infusing hope into them, and just watch them dream a big dream. So oftentimes, before we work with somebody, you ask them, what do you want to do with your life? What's your dream? And you're just, hey, get in this with me. And they're like, I don't know.
That's that's the forbidden term. Mine is trying is lying. Yours is we cannot say I don't know.
Well, think about it. It's a lazy mind not willing to take and do the work to really find out, okay, if I did know.
Yeah.
If I did know, what could be some of the possibilities for me? And there is a fear to dream, a fear of failing.
Yes.
And we ask our students, and this was in that book Think and Grow Rich, if you knew you wouldn't fail, what would you do?
Yeah.
Like, how big would your dreams be? And so that is one of the things that kickstarted us. Like, hey, let's just meditate on this just for a second. If you knew that you could accomplish anything you set out to, how big would your dreams actually be?
Yeah. And I mean, most people know this, but it's not taught in schools. Most adults that have done personal development, this is a known truth. 95% of the time we're in our subconscious, right? So we're not in our conscious mind 5%. Why this is not taught in school? In fact, our son is in Kenya right now, Jake, and he's reading Think and Grow Rich, and he keeps calling me with these aha moments, you know? And really what it is he's very conscious, right, of what is occurring.
Well, go ahead and really quick, just take 30 seconds and describe where he's at in Kenya, what's going on. Does he have access to social media? Does he have access to a TV?
No.
And then some of the epiphanies and the way his mind is absorbing what he's reading is leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Like if he could check out with a TV, I mean, nothing, you know, it's this age group. But he doesn't have that option to do that right now. And some of the reports that we're getting are just awe-inspiring.
Yeah. And the story is our son came to us 2-3 months ago, recognized that he was getting stuck, you know, and doesn't matter what household. We gave him the tools. He has to pick up the tools and use them. And he chose that he was in a dilemma in his mind. And so we have farms in Kenya and a very, a shack on the farm. And he intentionally put him in himself in an uncomfortable situation for the purpose of growth. Most adults won't put themselves through that kind of suffering. So we were very proud parents, of course. But the truth is that he is awake now because he is in discomfort, and comfort and distraction are the very things that get us into that automatic state of mind. I mean, we do things on autopilot, right? Also, of course, with that comes gratitude, because I said, hey, buddy, you were complaining about what's going on here in your daily lives, and I haven't heard one complaint from you in Kenya. And it's like, hey, Mom, my eyes are open. I'm reading the books that you requested, and it's really clear that fear of becoming an adult was starting to get to him because he's going to be 18 soon, right? So really the fear part also I wanted to speak to is, what are we fearing, right? The number one thing is other people's opinions, a fear of rejection. That is so painful, right? Fear of failure. But we have to reframe those things if we're going to get unstuck.
Well, a lot of it's being in comfort. So in working in the dialogue that I have with a lot of these teens is they are so afraid of somebody judging them.
Yes.
It's because they've been judging themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when we break through with them, it's like, okay, what if nobody was really judging you?
Yeah.
And so what you had just talked about, and what I titled is, it's called the fear of man.
Yeah.
And a couple psychologists that step on this is that we as a nation are going in debt to buy things that we don't want, to impress people we don't like.
That we don't care about, right? And everybody talks about that, but are we really shifting out of that? And the reality is that rejection is incredibly painful. You and I are so sensitive to that with each other. If we say, ooh, the thing you said to me as a married man, you know, if you said that to your wife, if you see me feeling rejected by you, we're real quick to reconcile, because that is one of the things most people will hurt themselves over, right?
Well, we have learned how to be intentional about what we're doing. And again, just being intentional doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect, because we still screw up and then maybe still get into subconscious and stuff. But it's like, what would happen? What would anybody's life look like if we got off of autopilot?
Yeah.
So when you think about it, do you remember brushing your teeth this morning? It was done on autopilot. Yeah. You get in autopilot, you brush your teeth, you get in your car, and most people are walking around in life asleep. But what would our lives look like if we were intentional and we had a vision that was bigger than the discomfort or even our thought of the discomfort? Because a lot of times we think that we might have to be uncomfortable with this, or maybe we're afraid of this, but when we come face to face with it, is it really as bad as we imagined it was going to be?
Well, my favorite saying is what? Fear is future events appearing real. That's why it's a bully, because it's a liar, right? And so we don't often put ourselves in these strategies we're going to talk about or up against those fears because they have gripped us, because they appear so real. So you have to be in a very conscious state of mind and intentional about calling out that bully, right? One of the biggest things I've ever done in my life is the Alcatraz swim. And the Alcatraz swim, we swam Alcatraz from Alcatraz to the shore.
So tell them why. Just tell everybody why.
Well, for me, I watched Jaws too many times as a young kid.
Not why you were afraid. Why did we even do things like that?
Well, we did it because we've always had these experiential trainings, and we face our fears and push ourselves against those kind of discomforts so that we can level up in life.
Well, and so you and I, we've taken so many students on that swim, and it was called the aha moment. So I want you to imagine something, if you're listening, that we take a group of people who have a limiting belief system about their life, and take a boat. We get dropped off out at Alcatraz. Now the boat's gone. There's only one way back to shore.
Yeah.
Let's swim. And I can see the fear physically starting to grip them. And I look at them. Hey, if you refuse to quit. If you really refuse to quit, it's impossible to fail. I promise you, if you refuse to quit, it's impossible to fail. Now, 100% success you and I have had with the people that we've trained that with. My favorite part is not necessarily the swim. It's the conversation that happens on the shore with these people. And I tell them, hey, not only did you do what you thought was impossible, you did what the whole world thinks is impossible. What do you think you could do with your life now? And we went to watch those people go on to be successes in realms that they thought was for somebody else. They thought that is for somebody else. And after that, they're like, no, this is for me.
Oh, you went there, Michael. So my experience, having done I was training other people to do a different swim, right? So I had to face myself in that moment, and that was terrifying because you were in the boat and you wouldn't let me out. And it was one of the greatest gifts you've ever given me. You looked at me, I was struggling halfway through. Like when you say if you choose to not quit, you can't fail. Well, when you are treading for hours not getting anywhere, it felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. But again, it was a condition of the mind if I was going to push through.
So to my defense and your support, I remember the exact moment you're talking about, and you're looking at me. And so like everything inside me that wants to protect you, because you're looking at me, you're like, honey, help.
Yes.
Right? And I'm looking at you, and I'm thinking in the future, if I get her in this boat right now, she's going to register maybe an incomplete, not necessarily a failure, but an incomplete. And I know what that does in the psyche.
Yeah.
And I knew you, and I knew that you could do it. And I mean, think about it. If you knew that there was no plan B, plan A is the only option you have.
We burned the boats.
Now, how'd you feel when you hit shore? Were you grateful that I didn't let you get in the boat?
Not only was I grateful, it was an incredible gift as a wife. You have to frame it in a way that you receive it as a gift, because I was pretty pissed off for a minute. And the notable piece for me is that there was a time when I was most fearful, and I started to have these things. I don't know if you recall this because I've told this part of the story. There was logs and actual garbage starting to surround me.
No, I remember that, and I couldn't drive the boat into that garbage, and I watched you swim through it, and I'm just like, and I'm praying for you.
Yeah.
I know you're going to be okay, because your ego itself wouldn't let you fail anyways.
Yeah, I know. The ego gets a bad rap. I know some psychologists will hate hearing us say that, but I embrace my ego, keep it in check. But it did push me, mostly because there was warrior men ahead of me, and I wanted to be the woman to push and make it. And
you were the only woman that made it.
The only woman that made it. However, that garbage coming to me, I was so awake in that moment that I was aware that my fear, it was a symbol of what was happening. And in survival, all of our energy comes in. And creation, it goes out. And fear keeps us in survival. And so because we train these things and we debrief after, and we know what the meaning is in these experiential trainings, I became super awake that the garbage was representing my fear. And
that's beautiful. You've never shared that with me before.
Yeah, and it was a terrifying moment. In fact, I thought to myself, this is quite embarrassing, that the energy was going down and actually drawing sharks to me. So not only was I covered in garbage, I was also believing that my energy and fear was drawing the sharks to me, which was also symbolic.
Now, you had so many fears, your imaginations were running wild. did any of your imaginations of the worst case scenarios ever happen?
Well, for a half of a second, because, we still do ocean swims. So there's always this like, whew, it really comes and goes, and I have a lot of control over it. But I knew that this was my epiphany, and I believe it's so typical to fear, because the opposite of fear is what? Faith.
Yes.
Okay. And there was this moment when all this was happening, I go, oh my goodness, I'm terrified, and I haven't asked God for help. And I rolled on my back and I looked up to the sky and I was like, help, that's all I could get out. And really, the garbage, whether the garbage left me or I pushed through it, it didn't matter. It was the most symbolic moment in my life, because it gave me the strength to keep pushing. And on that swim, you can't rest, which I also think it's symbolic of life, because if you quit, you will be swept out to sea.
Well, even so, you got the tide running against you,
Yes.
and
Current,
the water is constantly moving. So if you just take a break for 5 minutes, it was the equivalency of maybe you lost 20 minutes of
Yes.
forward momentum.
Yes.
So either you're going forward or you're going backwards.
Yeah, and that's life, right? We very rarely, for more than a day, are stagnant. We're either falling into old habits, excuse me, or we're moving forward. And that's the difference that I really pulled into my life, the survival versus creation. And I check myself. Am I in survival? Because that's that gut feeling we get, right? Fear is so physical in our bodies. And when I'm in creation, you and I will get in an argument or something, and you see that I have to create something for Dauntless Nation, and you'll come to me and say, I need you to get in creation moment. Let's get this off of us.
So what are some forms of creation, really quick? So like, it's not just creating something. So I've noticed, like, if I'm being philanthropic with somebody, and it doesn't have to be money, it could be time, it could be maybe a word of encouragement. Those are forms of creation, also
Yes.
forms of giving that get me out of some of those stinking thinking, some of those paralyzed thoughts, so that I can create some forward momentum in me and even enrich other people's, like the tools that are used to get me moving forward are me giving of myself to something or somebody.
Yeah, that's why I hate the term self-help. I love that it's getting a little attention now, that people are sick of that, because I think it's the opposite. Yes, you care for yourself. Yes, you take care of your daily habits. But really, creation is that outward motion, right? So we're designed to serve others. We're designed to deposit into other people's lives. And that's how we get out of ourselves. So to self-help, to me, seems inward. And there's a fine line, I get, where the psychologists go, but the truth is that there is really about personal development is about helping others. You've got to include that.
I know what you're saying about that, the self-help, and there is self-help, but I think it's the way that a lot of people have attached and done that. So like, I've worked with some people that are like, I just need to focus on me right now.
And
I go,
well, you're in danger.
I go, well, not only you're in danger, I think you've been doing too much of that already.
Yeah. Yeah, we have exercises around power and givers and takers, and we don't need to go into it, but the reality is these experiences that we put through will really define who's the giver and taker. And at the end of the day, the taker is the one that's sucking the energy in.
Well,
excuse me.
A lot of times when we've done these, we've had a handful of people who've ended up on the taker, spectrum, and we call it taking because we don't want to give that label to a person. Taker is like you're in an attitude of taking right now.
Yeah, it's not who you are. It's what you're doing.
It's what you're doing. But a lot of people they attach that, and so there's been a revelation to people like, holy shit, I'm actually taking energy. I'm robbing. I'm stealing. And it's like, hey, not making you bad, but is this really how you want to live your life?
Yeah, it's just an awareness, right? We all have these things. We all have our blind spots. That's not who you are, or it is maybe who you are right now, but it is who you want to become.
Well, it doesn't have to be who you can choose the results that you're going to have for your life.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, you do choose the results for your life. Just which results do you want?
Yeah. And getting back to fear, I believe everybody in that inward motion, that self-help, they're trying to get out of their pit, right? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of something. And often afraid of failure or rejection. Being in a relationship with somebody is typically rejection or opinion of others that you don't want, right? Or judgment. So if we are inward, if you can sense that energy going in, you're probably in a state of fear, because faith is the opposite, right? You take a step and you're trusting that God will meet you there, and you just keep moving forward. That's all that outward creative momentum.
Now, I want to be clear is that when we're talking about fear and being fearless, that we're not talking about being reckless also. And
we've been accused of that a few times.
We have, but from people who are fearful. I've
Yes.
never been accused of being reckless by anybody that's been in creation.
This is true.
Now,
right.
but it didn't mean that I wasn't afraid.
Yes.
It just mean that I wasn't going to let my fear hold me back.
Yeah.
And then it created a strategy. And then more times than not, I wasn't walking through those fears alone. I either had you by my side, or I had other team members, or we had a team, a group of people that we walked through some of those fears together. And the whole message of it was like, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And fear says, hey, you're alone. You're the only person with these thoughts. You're isolated in a world of 8 billion people. And the more I told myself, hey, I'm not alone. And the decisions that I make when I know that I'm not alone are profitable for the results that I want.
One of the things when I was struggling in my early 20s, somebody said, there's Dana. There's somebody in the room that is alone with everybody here. And basically, I don't know, 7 billion people then, I think he used.
Yeah.
And I knew he was talking about me, but I thought he was going to say somebody else. And it was the first time I'd been seen in my life, like really seen.
How did it feel?
It was that gentleman helped transform my life. But the point was I was gripped by fear, and it didn't look like I was, because my behavior was so reckless. So that's the fine line we're talking about, because when you're reckless, you're also operating in fear. So for me, I was outspoken, loud, doing things that were, to the world standards, seem fearless, but I was terrified. So fear can mask itself in many different ways. It doesn't mean that you always look paralyzed. You may be paralyzed. And one of the things that we're noting with the families is fear is contagious. And I have a few families we're working with right now that the mother or father are gripped with fear. It may look a little different. We're professionals in this, so we see it quite clearly. However, their child is full of fear. They're looking at their kid coming to us. I don't know why she's so afraid. And we're looking at the family going, no judgment. It's gripped the whole family. And I think it's a ripple effect.
Well, the children are a product of their environment.
Yes.
And the primary environment that they're in is the household. Mm-hmm. But, we could talk about that fear machine called the news and the media, which really puts it out. And so, and a lot of times what I've noticed in the people that we work with is that fear they'll retitle it being safe. I'm being safe.
I officially hate that word.
Actually, Dauntless does not use the word safe, by the way.
We have chosen the word sacred. It's become a thing where, have a safe day. What is that expression? I don't even want to say it.
No, they say be safe.
Yeah, be safe. So, and what does that mean? Now, Jordan Peterson, we have to go here. You know what I'm going to say.
All in?
He's like, we're all in. We're going to die anyway. I mean, that's why I jumped in Alcatraz. I had to think, am I doing service to my children, putting myself at this risk? But the reality is I was more at risk driving, particularly the way I drive, than to jump in the ocean. But it was a fear of mine that I needed to overcome. But we're all in. We're going to die anyway. And we are allowing this fear to rule our lives, stop us from going after that job and that dream, stop us from leveling up, stopping us from really getting our body in the shape that we desire, or dating the guy we think that we're not good enough for. Whatever the case may be, it is stopping us from living out our dreams.
Well, so you had said something like, am I serving my children by doing this? And so I got to be a spectator of watching you do that. And I would say you served your children more in that moment, in the fruit of that moment, than in most other times, than like cooking them dinner or whatnot. Because, you would, and you talk to a lot of guardians of this, is like, hey, I don't care what you think you're teaching your children, more is caught than taught. So what do you think your children actually caught from that?
That's my phrase, bro.
And I just said that's what you say.
More is caught than taught. You rise, I rise. We're going to do a podcast on that. I'm super passionate about that because I was terrible young mother for a while. That's just what's true. A lot of moms mess it up in the early years, or we think we do, right? Because we're trying to have it all together. There's a lot of messy conversation around that. But I wasn't emulating who I wanted them to be. And I think that's what's up. One person's afraid, then the other person's afraid. It's that, and we're just in this sick cycle of getting worse and worse. And the fear will grip us, but that faith and that courage and that incapable of being subdued, because you will not subdue the Bryants. So you got to keep pressing in, and your kids are watching. They're watching us.
Not only they're watching us, they're watching how are we connecting. Okay, so for men, and I'm going to speak on men, me, for instance. So my biggest fear up until, I don't know, about 10 or 12 years ago was actually connection with another soul. Because what I realized is that...
I recall. It's been great. Your journey with me
in connecting with another soul, you get to see into another person's soul, but guess what else happens?
They see you.
They see me too. And did I really want to see them? So that was my biggest fear, is like, what if they don't like me? What happens if I show them me and I feel weak? I feel weak by being vulnerable with this person and the purpose of connection. What if they don't like me? Oh shit, what if I don't like me? Yeah. And so all of these crazy conversations are going on in my mind. And I remember the first time I really, truly connected with somebody. And it was in this room. It was with one of my other instructors. And it felt like I just jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge with no parachute, no nothing. And what had happened is when the connection came, I realized I didn't need a parachute because I could fly.
Oh, I love that. I love that. As your wife, thank you for actually learning how to be an intimate human being. I think I was designed for Michael Bryant because no other woman would put up with that. However, our fears are all, men fear vulnerability. I was thinking about a couple guardians. I want to have a few of them here.
I'd love to have a few of them here.
Wait, don't use names.
I can't use his name?
No.
Can we describe him with a...
Well, he's got a long white beard. Not quite Santa, but good pirate. He played a good pirate recently with us. The reason I bring him up is because the breakthrough he has had through vulnerability with his family, that's courage to me. Now, masculinity is under attack in our country. I'm not down for that. There's nothing toxic about masculinity. But there is a fine balance between a man being vulnerable is actually beautifully masculine.
Well, not only that, it was in that what I perceived was darkness. When I went into that darkness because I was afraid, that's where I found light. Yeah. And that's where I realized I wasn't alone, because a lot of the perceived fears that I had, I wasn't the only one that had those. And when I realized that in the connection with other souls, I'm like, oh my God, we all have a lot of the similar fears. So that helped me be vulnerable with all kinds of people, because I'm like, dude, you have the same fears as me, so I'll jump first. Yeah. I'll jump first. I'll grab your hand, and let's go to an area that is sacred, where there's life, and then we can transform the world by getting into this darkness with other people, and we don't have to be afraid of the dark.
That, and think about it. What would it look like if we actually, everything really, the success of those that come through Dauntless Nation is truly because of vulnerability and connection, right? Okay, so what would it look like if we focused on our similarities, sort of bared our soul, because the division is what's causing our nation the trouble. But when you really connect with somebody, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, when you actually connect to the soul, those things that you've judged kind of go away. I've been in those situations. We all have. And it's when we front with that is when we get in danger. Right? So if we could actually bare our soul, if we could be vulnerable, if we could say, hey, this is my fear. I'm afraid that you're going to reject me. I'm afraid that I'm not going to get the job, Mr. Boss. What do I need to do to level up? Just asking the tough questions is the greatest strategy of all.
Well, not only that, that level of authenticity is dauntless.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the true definition of dauntless. And what I have hopes for the people that we come in contact with is that level of vulnerability, authenticity, and courage in the face of fear, where true connection happened, and then all of a sudden you're not alone anymore. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I say, and when we say fearlessly strengthening the family unit, the truth is, if you use the tools and strategies, if you're authentic and vulnerable in all areas of your life, with your career, with your spouse, with your children, that is the key to unlocking the prison doors that you're in with fear. That's it. That there's plenty of tools that we could talk about. We have an actual battle plan that will be coming up or may be available by the time you listen to this, with those strategies on those daily habits, what to do. But at the end of the day, fear is a liar. Future events appearing real. Becoming dauntless means that you are in process of becoming the courageous self that you are.
Well, not that you are, that you can become, and then
Yes.
just constantly leveling up, continually being a student. And what I want to say is, like, welcome to Dauntless Nation. Let's jump together. You are not alone.
You are not alone.
Bless you.
Bless you. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
If you want to find out more about how we can serve your family through our in-person trainings and online courses, visit dauntlessnation.com.
Where we are taking a stand for the next generation and the family values that make our nation stronger.